Morning, dear friends. Welcome. Today is Rosh Chodesh of Erev Shabbos, Friday, July 29th. And we're here to study the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. And right now it's Masechah Shabbos, 18th chapter, Kuf, Chaf, Ches, Amud Aleph. And soon we'll be both on Kuf, Chaf, Ches, Amud Beis. And we'll be starting a new Mishnah, Be'ezer Hashem. And of course, as you recall, we were talking about a whole variety of substances, mostly spices, herbs, but it was launched by a conversation about twigs, vines, and other sorts of items, which could be designated for two purposes. Either it could be designated for kindling, and it could also be designated for animal feed. And we said if it's animal feed, long story short, it's not Muktza, but if it is for kindling, if it is for burning, then it is entirely out of our minds, because of course you don't light a fire on Shabbos, and therefore it is entirely Muktza and cannot be changed on Shabbos to be fed to livestock. Now our Gemara is going to introduce.
I just realized yesterday Reb Label said his son is having a procedure and he's not here. Did anybody check to see how?
Yes, you're right. You are correct. Oh, he just messaged that. Oh, no, that's from yesterday.
Yeah.
So here's what we're going to do. Well, he's in California, so that's a more likely reason why he's not on. But let's dedicate once again our learning today, L'schus, a complete refuah, or someone remembers.
Was it Yitzchak ben Pinchas?
I jotted it down. Hold on.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
Does anyone recall? Hey, doctor, what did you say?
Was it Yitzchak ben Pinchas or the opposite?
No,
I don't remember. I'm not gonna.
I think the mother's name was Masha, maybe.
Yes, it was Masha.
Yes, that was Masha.
Yeah, I remember Masha.
Yitzchak ben Masha. All right, if we get an update, we'll dedicate to his learning for complete recovery. I'm sorry?
Is it Yitzchak ben Masha? Pinchas ben Masha. Whenever you remembers.
We'll say Yitzchak Pinchas and hope you got it right.
Yeah.
All right, let's get started. Again, learning should be this closer to time. So until now we were talking about vegetation that is Muktza, and when it could be carried, when it can't be carried. And actually much of the conversation was more about the identity. What exactly are these spices? And so we were talking about mint and thyme and what else? Hold on. Oh, I see. All right. We're talking about mint and thyme and hyssop and savory, the identity of spices. Now we're going to talk about another type of food that could be Muktza, though for a different reason. We're talking about raw foods. Now, edible foods are obviously not Muktza. They're available for your consumption. It's a mitzvah to eat meat, and you cannot eat without handling the item. So there is no question that meat is not Muktza. But what about if it is not fully processed? What if it is not safe for consumption? Well, would that not make it Muktza? And I think the answer is quite obvious. What's interesting about this Gemara is that we're going to talk about raw meat and raw fish. And yeah, I'm going to mute everyone just because there's some background noise, but please unmute to chime in, to inform us. Today I don't know what we is. Today there is plenty of consumption of raw fish, and there's plenty of consumption of well, not plenty, but you go to a fancy restaurant and you'll get carpaccio or whatever, some thinly sliced I believe is raw. Maybe it's cured with different kinds of meats. But let's see the Gemara, and then we can talk about what contemporary society consumes and if that would have any bearings on the halachic conversation. Itmar. So we are again continuing the conversation of Muktza edibles, but now we're talking about meat. Basar maliach, meat that is salted. Mutter letaltle b'Shabbos. You're allowed to carry it around on Shabbos. Why should you be allowed to carry it? Because presumably, once it's salted, it is edible. Basar tafel, but raw meat. When we say salted, we don't mean salted for kasher. So I believe we mean that it was salted to the point of, although maybe I'm wrong. Hold on. 1 second. Yeah, we're not talking about kashering. Kashering is another story. We're talking about salting. The meat is salted for the purpose of preservation and consumption. So basar maliach you can transport, and basar tafel, if it is raw, unbrined, unsalted for the purpose of eating. Rav Huna Amar Mutar l'tatla. Rav Huna says you may yet carry it, and Rav Chisda says asur l'tatla. What can you do with this meat?
Would you be allowed to salt it on Shabbos? And then you could eat it, right?
Not in this manner. Don't believe so. No. Also, you don't think you have the time.
That's already altered states. It's like.
By the way, well, let's read Rashi. Then I'll. Basar tafel she'einai meluach. Mutar l'tatla. Why would you be allowed to carry it if it is unsalted and not edible, not consumable? Less le Muktza b'tiltul.
You can feed it to an animal.
What?
You can feed it to a dog.
But you're not going to feed a prime grade
Well, no, you're not.
piece of meat that really you're going to throw on the grill right after Shabbos. You're not going to feed it to a dog. I mean, today I think people will give prime cuts to their dog, but I don't think that's what the Gemara's intentions. So when it says, certainly that's not how Rashi understands it. Rav Huna says mutar l'tatlei. Rashi says this means the less le Muktza b'tiltul. He must not believe that there is the laws of Muktza in regards to carrying this item. So you should be allowed to carry it. And Rav Chisda says asur l'tatla because it's Muktza. Oh, Reb Errol, welcome on.
Good morning. Good morning.
Reb Errol, we wanted an update. How's your son doing?
Baruch Hashem, it's a minor, but still, yeah, everything went well, thank God.
And remind us, his name was Yitzchak Pinchas ben Masha.
Avram Pinchas ben Masha.
Avram Pinchas. Okay, we were close. Avram. They said
Pinchas.
Yitzchak, but Avram and Yitzchak are pretty close.
Avram Pinchas.
Avram Pinchas. Okay, Avram Pinchas ben Masha. We'll dedicate today's learning for his recovery.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
news
you.
for all of Klal Yisrael.
I spoke to him. He seems fine. Thank God.
Good. We remain impressed that even in California,
British Columbia.
I'm sorry, British Columbia. I think West. You see, I'm an American. I say West Coast. That means California. Even in British Columbia, we're impressed that you check in. Even in California time zone. Okay.
Exactly.
All righty, let's see the Gemara. So Rav Huna says, mutar l'tatla. There's no concern of Muktza. We don't care that it's Muktza. It's not it's there's no restriction, even though there's nothing to do with it. And Rav Chisda says asur l'tatla. The Gemara asks, Rav Huna Amar mutar l'tatla. Does it sound right that Rav Huna would take the position that you're allowed to carry inedible meat? And now we get to an interesting teacher-student lineage. Rav Huna Talmid Rav. Rav Huna was a student of Rav. V'Rav Rabbi Yehuda spherely, and we know that Rav embraced the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the Islay Muktza, that he does hold of a more prevalent Muktza concern. So if Rav Huna paskins like Rav, and Rav says that there's Muktza, Rav Huna should say you're not allowed to carry the raw meat. That's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara answers, when we say that Rav holds like Rav Yehuda, we don't mean that he embraces every aspect of Rav Yehuda's position. We mean that more broadly, there's an alignment between their opinions. Muktza l'achila, savar lak Rav Yehuda. The fact that this item would be considered muksa for eating, Rav Yehuda believes that it is muksa. I'm sorry, Rav believes that it's muksa. Muksa l'taltal, but to say that the restriction doesn't allow you to carry it, savar lak Rabbi Shimon, here he is more lenient. Let's read Rashi. Klamer be'isr muksa le'inyan achila, savar lak Rav Yehuda, the asr la'ichlei, to prohibit eating it because of its muksa status. Well, here Rav would view like Rabbi Yehuda, but he would not agree that you're not allowed to carry it. So apparently, bear with me for a moment, there's a law that something that is muksa, something that's set aside, cannot become something that you eat on Shabbos. So the Gemara is answering that Rav agrees that it would be classified as muksa to say you cannot eat it. And I know what you're thinking, you can't eat it because you can't eat it. What are you saying that it's muksa? Well, maybe you might want to try it, I don't know. But he'll agree that you can carry it. You understand my problem? The whole reason why it's muksa to begin with is you can't eat it. So what would we be saying, that there's a muksa la'achila? But I think the idea stands that in essence it's classified as muksa. And therefore a restriction of consumption might apply, but you may not be allowed to carry. The Gemara continues. Rav Yitzchak Amar the Asl Tal. I'm sorry, Rav Chisda Amar Asl Tal. So Rav Huna says you can carry it, and that was our question, and we answered. But now Rav Chisda, who, as you may recall, many times throughout Shas, and certainly in Masechah Shabbos, tends to spar, have difference of opinion in halacha with Rav Huna. So Rav Chisda says, Asur l'taltalai, you're not allowed to carry this meat. It's fully restricted by virtue of it being muksa, that it was set aside in the onset of Shabbos. Now we're going to see a story that challenges this halachic, this statement. Are you sure that Rav Chisda restricts carrying raw meat? But Rav Yitzchak bar Ami lebeit Rav Chisda, once upon a time, Rav Chisda bar Ami shared that he came to the house of Rav Chisda, v'chazahu bar Avza, and he saw a duck. The hava kametaltulu le mishim shalatula, and he sees that the staff are moving the chicken out of the sun into the shade. Rashi, bar Avza shachot, a geshacht in a duck, a slaughtered duck, and they were moving it mishim shalatula shelo yasriach. They were moving it out of the sun so it doesn't spoil. So Amar Rav Chisda, when Rav Chisda saw that the staff were moving, I'm sorry, but Amar Rav Chisda explained, chesron kis ka chazenan hacha. There is a potential for loss, and there Rav Chisda himself told them to move it out of the sun, indicating that he does not believe in the laws of muksa. So Gemara here answers, Shani Hasam, Shani bar Avza, it's different. A duck is different. The chazi le'umtza, because raw duck can be Rashi. It can be eaten raw. It can be eaten without being salted. And so being that duck can be eaten raw without being salted, therefore it was not muksa. Now, I have no knowledge of the fact that you can actually, today, people eat a raw duck. Anyone can confirm or deny this this culinary phenomenon? So the Mefarshim and the Halacha say the reason why a duck might be consumed raw, unlike beef, is because a duck's meat is in principle softer. So we're not talking now about the essential ability to eat raw meat. We're talking about the softness, because one of the reasons, not all the reasons, but besides for health purposes, one of the reasons why we might put meat in the fire is to break down and to allow it to be easier to chew. So the Bach and the Tas say that it's easier to chew, and therefore people might eat it raw. Interesting. Tosfos says Mikan Raya the Dam Ha'ivarim by Pirish Mutar to Ka'amar the Chazi Umsa Afal Gav Delay Maliach. Tosfos appears to have a different take on this Gemara, which is actually very interesting. Tosfos, maybe I'm misunderstanding this Tosfos. Let's see something. Very interesting. Hold on. One more minute, and then we'll continue and we'll finish them. We got to see something.
Rabbi,
Yes, doctor.
when we talk about moving something, again, I don't recall exactly how that's defined. Touching is not moving. Moving, if something is in the freezer, unsalted, and you want to get to something near it, and you have to take it out or move it. And now you're saying it's muktza, so
That might be a different consideration. You might be able to move it around, but
okay.
you might. I'm not saying.
Move it, take it out of the refrigerator, put it back in there. Just a question, because that might be realistic.
Interesting. I'm sorry. You just give me one more second here. Hold on. We got to see something.
Now, I have a good answer, Rabbi. Someone once told me to get the duck out of here on Shabbos, and I told him it's muktza. I can't.
Oh, yeah.
I think the doctor's just ducking the question.
All right, I'm going to avoid opening this can of worms for now. But we nether, we will get to it. There is a launching point here to get into some of the intricacies of the laws of salting meat. Hello. Oh. Go ahead. Go ahead. All right. Anyways, we're going to avoid that topic because in Ribero's terms, it is a big topic, and we'll have to go from bottoms up, and we'll spend a few days learning the laws of Malicha, which now is not a good time to do that. But suffice it to say, we have here the Machlokes, Rav Chisda and Rav Huna. Rav Chisda says you may carry it. The Gemara wants to know why. Doesn't he hold of Muktza? So we answer, yeah, he holds of a certain application of Muktza, but he wouldn't restrict carrying it. And then we have Rav Chisda, who says you may not carry raw meat. And then we have a story of a duck. We clarify, the Gemara clarifies duck meat is different. Duck meat is quite soft, and therefore there's more room for leniency, even though it's probably unideal to eat raw duck, but maybe b'shas hadchak, or maybe in those days they considered it a delicacy. Finely sliced duck with a little lemon. I don't know, maybe it was considered a delicacy. Who knows? Let's continue with the Gemara. So now I'm going to talk about fish. Taner Rabbanan, dag maliach, salted fish, mutla tataloi. You're allowed to carry the salted fish. It's not muksa. But dag tofel, raw unsalted meat, or uncooked fish, also lataltalai cannot be carried, Rashi. Dag tofel also lataltalai. The enoi roya leklum, there's nothing you can do with a raw fish. Vilaklovim lav date limishtia. You're not intending to throw a perfectly good fish to the dogs. You're going to cook it after Shabbos. Aval maliach, when a fish or when fish is salted, nechol chai al yedei mol chai, it can be eaten raw by virtue of having been salted. So the Brisa here says fish.
Obviously, they never heard of sushi back then.
Hold on. Yeah, that's what I was referring to when I said we'll talk about contemporary salted fish. You can carry dog toffel, but unsalted fish, it's muksa. Basar, when it comes to meat, bein toffel, bein maliach, regardless of its status, mutla tatlai, ustomak Rabbi Shimon. This Brisa follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that says that you're allowed to carry raw meat. So this is a more lenient opinion, which is also consistent with what we read in the previous discussion in the name of Rav Huna. All right. So yeah, it's pretty obvious that in those days they did not eat sushi, and they also maybe didn't have sushi grade fish. Right? You can't go to the store and buy a smelling six-day-old slice of salmon and put that into sushi. You have to have extremely fresh, well-prepped fish. And I actually heard from a chef, maybe you've heard this too, you never want to buy fish on the weekends, because on Sunday the fish was delivered probably on Thursday, maybe on Friday. So you want to make sure that when you're getting fish in a restaurant, especially raw fish, you want to make sure that it's close as possible to the day it was delivered. But anyway, so yeah.
So what do you think? If nobody buys it on Sunday, what do you think you're gonna get on Monday?
I hear you. You're saying don't boycott fish or you're just going to eat it a day later.
It's gonna be even worse.
Yeah. I was actually, we were somewhere. Oh, I know. I met up with a Jew in New York a few weeks ago. We went to a relatively high-end restaurant, new restaurant, and we asked about fish. And they said, oh, it's Sunday. We don't even carry fish on Sunday, because anyone that's going to deliver us a fish on Sunday, it's going to be from last week. We wait till Monday, then we get fresh or fresher fish. So there you have it. From the professionals themselves. If you're looking to overpay and have an interesting culinary experience, you can go to Meat in Crown Heights. But you're going to better stick to Teaneck and fine dining.
Teaneck is not cheap either.
Yeah. But at least you don't have to schlep.
It's true.
All right, let's see the Gemara. Taner Abanon. So now let's move on to bones. What's the deal with bones? Are bones muksa? Bones are not muksa. You can carry them because dogs love bones. You can feed dogs to bones. I'm sorry, you can feed the bones to dogs. Basar tapuach. What about tofuach? Swollen meat, which literally means spoiled meat, says Rashi. Masriyach. You can also carry spoiled meat because you can feed it to wild animals. What about water that was left out overnight? Which there might be snake, poison. Those that joined us for our study of Meseches Avodah Zarah may recall a lengthy discussion on the subject. Well, you can also carry that. Cats can drink it. Cats have 9 lives. No, apparently cats were less susceptible to consuming snake venom in their water. Rashi, it's a very interesting logic. I don't know if there was like scientific data to back this up, but they know that cats eat snakes, so it must be that cats are not susceptible to snake poison or something like that.
I don't think the snake itself is poisonous. It's just
I understand. I'm just reading to you what Rashi says.
Yeah, I know. I understand.
You may absolutely not transport or touch this water. If you carry it around, someone might end up drinking it. Why would they end up drinking it? Well, I guess if you're keeping it around and you're carrying it around, you're asking for trouble. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says no handling of and no maintaining mayim megum. So the long story short If something can be fed to your animals that you are, especially animals that you are responsible for, you can handle it. Tosfos asked an interesting question. You know who else can eat raw meat? Your dog. Rashi. Leima mipnei shu ma'achal leklavim. Maybe there's a different interpretation of the word tapuach. Maybe tapuach here does not mean swollen, as Rashi says. Maybe it means something else. What would it mean? So we gotta go back to Tosfos in the beginning of this discussion. I think, wasn't there a Tosfos? Hold on. Well, anyways, yeah, maybe it's another kind of not ready to eat, but maybe it's not spoiled, maybe it's unsalted, maybe it's unprocessed. Well, here we have it. This concludes our Mishnah, the analysis of the Mishnah, talking about the baskets that can be moved, which kind of stuff. We lastly talked about the ability to transport twigs and other kinds of items because they are held around for feeding animals, which led us to a discussion about meat that's not entirely ideal or not entirely edible. Maybe it's raw, maybe it's salted, maybe it's unsalted, maybe it's spoiled. What about fish, bones? And now we conclude, or ready to move on to the next Mishnah. This is a Mishnah that we actually quoted long ago in our Gemara. As we were learning through Masechta, we mentioned this Mishnah among others. Let's see if it sounds familiar. You're allowed to take a basket that's turned over and place it near where the baby chickens are, the chicks are, so they can go up and out and back in to their place where they live. What do you do with you can't handle that froichim directly, but you're allowed to put a basket, even though the basket is going to be serving a Muktza item. Let's read Rashi. From here, we can learn that you're able to wield, carry, transport, move a keli, even though it is serving a Muktza item. Rabbi Yitzchak Mishanele Beperek Gimel, I imagine this is. So maybe Rashi is reminding us that we learned this long ago in the beginning ish of Masechah Shabbos in the 3rd chapter. What about a tarnagel shabarcham and Abai, says Rashi? You're allowed to shove it, even with your hands. You can't pick it up, but you could do anything short of that. You could shove it into the house so that you don't lose the tarnagolas. But more than not losing it, the tarnagolas is in trouble. Even though stamazoi, you shouldn't even be allowed to push a chicken, which is muksa. But here, because of the jeopardy that she's in, Chazal in the Mishnah clarify that you're allowed to push it to prevent it from suffering. So this may actually, believe it or not, although it sounds like you're shoving the tarnagal, you're actually doing an act of avoiding sar b'alei chayim. You're avoiding the animal being under greater distress and duress. You're allowed to encourage and lead, cause to move a calf and a foal, rather, a baby and mother, horse, right? Isha midadas bena, a mother can help her son walk. Let's read Rashi. Midad and Agalim. Oiches b'tzavarai u'b'tzadav v'goyroi mesayeyo manela b'raglav. You can schlep the animal. Isha midadas bena oichaztoi b'zoroyosav me'achayrav. You can support a child from behind. U'mesayate v'hu mania raglav v'chelav. You can kind of have the child. You can facilitate the child's walking. The Mishnah continues, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, a Masai. In what context is a mother allowed to assist a baby, a young child? Are you allowed to move a child? So long as the child is ultimately going to take the steps on their own. But just to drag a kid, first of all, not the best way to transport a child, but for the purposes of Shabbos, you're essentially carrying the child. So Asr. Rashi says, this is essentially an act of carrying. But if you help the child along, even if you are partially supportive, but the child does the feet, the moving of the feet, then that is okay on Shabbos, and this is our Mishnah. Hang on. All right, let's see the Gemara. So this is an interesting Mishnah. Again, familiar about animal-related activities. These are Muktza adjacent, all inyanim, all prohibitions that are in their essence rabbinic in nature and have relevance to the common Shabbos observance. So again, this is Muktza in the realm of animals. Animals, generally speaking, are Muktza. They cannot be transported. They cannot be carried because you don't have much to do with them on Shabbos. Chacham made Xer, you cannot use an animal on Shabbos lest you come to ride on them or do other kinds of malacha. But here, all of the activities that we're saying that are permitted are care related. So let's see the Gemara for some more clarity on what you can and what one may not do with their livestock. Here's the Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. We're gonna love this Gemara. So again, this is gonna the objective of our Gemara is to talk about where Chazal permit interaction, carrying, moving, touching animals, even though in an ideal scenario you wouldn't need to do it and you would be avoiding Muktza. There is going to be an intersection of the discussion of Batsar Balei Chayim, because there are going to be occasions, as we mentioned in the Mishnah, where Chazal will do withdraw or waive their laws of Muktza for the purpose of Tsar Balei Chayim. There will also be scenarios where we do not feel like the most ideal application of Tsar Balei Chayim. So just a heads up. Or I think what we say is trigger warning. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Here, let's discuss more halachas about animals. An animal fell into the aqueduct, fell into the water stream or water channel. That animal may not be drowning because it wasn't very deep, but the animal cannot get out. And it's bad news to be stuck in a body of water or an aqueduct. Eventually, God forbid, an animal could drown. So what do? Maybe you can place blankets, cushions, other stuff into the water, which allows the animal to now have an elevated stairs, if you will, to let the animal come out. Also, and now the animal will emerge. So what is this? This is somewhat similar to the case of placing a basket before the Efrochim. We are creating the option, we're creating the opportunity for the animal to climb out by creating a little stairs. But obviously, or what we can infer from here is you cannot physically remove that. Meisvei, now let's see a brisa that seems to create a problem. What do you do if an animal falls into a body of water, into a stream, or here we're saying an aqueduct? You feed the animal, so the animal doesn't starve to death. But from here, what it sounds like is parnasa in karmuk. It seems like we're saying you may feed the animal, but you may not put blankets and pillows to get the animal out. So what is it? Can you even put karmuk as Rav taught, or may you only feed the animal? My answer is like kasha. There's no contradiction. When you can feed the animal, that would be ideal to mitigate, to limit the amount of interaction, the amount of muktzah. But in a scenario where you cannot provide the animal for food, and we could be a little creative. We could imagine a scenario where there's nowhere to put the food down. Maybe it's a fast-moving stream. I don't know. But that is the explanation of the Gemara. Oh, so here he quotes the Chidush Aran, who says the scenario might be that the water is very deep. And so when the water is very deep, you'll place the food down, but the food just keeps on sinking to the bottom. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch real fast. An animal falls into the stream, into the water, into a stream or to an aqueduct. If the water is very deep. You see, the Shulchan Aruch is quoting this earlier commentary, but it ends up explaining our Gemara. The water is very deep. You cannot just give it food there. Maybe you're allowed to create a little bit of a situation, a little bridge, a little stairs, mishum tsar bali chayim, because of mitigating animal pain, animal suffering. Although by placing an animal into the water, you're essentially taking a good functioning kli and you're turning it into a non-available keli, but that is nonetheless permissible, especially because here we're dealing with tsar bali chayim. Oh, excuse me. Maybe we're in the wrong simon here. One second. I don't know. Shinhei 19. Shinhei 19. Okay, here. Here, you're wondering, what about another option? Can you have a Gentile extricate the animal, take the animal out? So here the Be'er Hativ quotes earlier commentaries. It says, you are allowed to hire a Gentile, but you, Jew, are not allowed to schlep the animal out. Even if the alternative is the animal dies, there is still no license to extract the animal under that circumstance, which is a strong statement. Let's just look at the Mishnah Brura in 1 second. Why are we talking about pillows and blankets? So he says, you can also put anything else. He's making a chiddush. When you place a pillow in the water, it becomes entirely full of water. It's going to take you a long time till you could use it again. So even though you're ruining it, you're still there. There's a license. Because the power of our concern of a animal's pain, which is a biblical concern, it is able to, on occasion, push aside a rabbinic concern. Because the Chazal said you're not allowed to take a keli that's usable and make it unusable. You put underneath. You're not allowed to literally, you're not allowed to physically with your hands remove the animal. Because the animals are considered muktza. Although there's an animal that's in pain, we do not have the ability on our own to equate and to measure different rabbinic prohibitions. So being that the Chazal prohibits handling an animal, and there is no source for leniency, therefore you're not allowed to. So the ideal scenario really would be to get a Gentile who's not mechayiv in Shabbos, even though there's an element of Amir La'akum, you're instructing a Gentile to do malacha, that is not a concern. But according to most poskim, one would not be allowed to use their hands.
But
Doctor?
what, aren't we worried, for instance, with the pillows and blankets, that we might wind up squeezing the water out of them on Shabbos?
That's
We
a
worry
good
about
question.
the same thing other places.
I think they're going to stay in the water till after Shabbos.
I
I don't know. It's a good question, actually. Anyways, but the bottom line is here we have a clear and overwhelming instruction. Ask your Shabbos. This is not an insulting phrase. Ask your Shabbos guy to give you a hand. Ask your neighbor who's compassionate and kind and sympathetic to the Shabbos observance, and hopefully they'll help you out. And by the way, I should say, what was I listening to recently? Two very famous Americans who both knew a little Yiddish because they were Shabbos guy. I think Colin Powell was famous for having been either a Shabbos guy or having been asked to help out, but there's somebody else that was on equal prominence that also, I believe, had a role in the Shabbos.
Elvis Presley.
Was it Elvis? Even
Yeah,
though today they say
know,
Elvis.
I know the
there was
guy whose
someone
family he
else.
was a Shabbos guy for.
Yeah, but there was someone else who knew some Yiddish. There was some,
Yeah.
I don't recall now, but by the way, Elvis Presley, there's a strong case to be made that he is halachically Jewish.
That could be a problem then. He was a Shabbos guy.
He must have not known that. Anyways, who knows? No, they went to the cemetery and his grandmother, I don't know. You know, the Jews want to convert every celebrity and make them Jewish. I don't know why, but all right. So this is the solution of the animal and how they can be helped on Shabbos. Gemara asks, by plopping your favorite pillow or not favorite pillow into the water, you're putting it out of commission. Rashi, the Mishanicham, when you place an animal underneath it, it is no longer accessible or available. So the Gemara answers, Sovar, Mevatel,
it was Sidney Poitier, the actor. I think he had an encounter with a Jew, and if I remember correctly.
By the way, there's a new comedian, a black comedian, who has a whole routine about how a Jewish couple in Washington Heights, I think, and asked them to come inside to put on the AC. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, but then they wind up without it.
Yeah, he says, first I was scared.
Because
First
you
I
can't
was.
call the police on Shabbos.
He said, first I was scared,
Right.
but then.
You figured they can't call the police on Shabbos, you took it.
Yeah. Let's stop over here. Actually, no, we'll just do these lines. Rav is of the opinion that to put a keli out of commission is rabbinic. So a biblical obligation to be compassionate to animals pushes aside the rabbinic concern of putting a keli out of commission. Now, I know this statement, which is a beautiful statement and an important statement and a reminder of the power of Tsar B'alei Chaim, also raises the question of when we do and when we don't say Tsar B'alei Chaim deraisa, and it should push aside the Rabbanan, because it's not obvious that in every scenario we're willing to push aside the Rabbanan for the purpose of Tsar B'alei Chaim. But this is the principle that's applied over here. Well, we'll stop here, dear friends. We wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos and a good Chodesh. We're davening for the complete recovery for Avram, Pinchas, Ben Masha, and all of Klal Yisrael, and especially all the dear members of our Chabur and their households. Should only health and happiness and good news. And Be'ezer Hashem will continue our journey through the Talmud on Monday. Everyone, have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Have a good Shabbos.
Oh,
Shabbos.
Thank you.